Welcome back to the Tori and Ren YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be making one of these scrap-friendly patchwork zipper pouches. I've recently been sewing a ton, so I had a ton of scraps laying around, and I wanted to try and use them, so I came up with this project idea, and I liked it so much I made a few of them, and I thought I would share it here with you in this video. So if you'd like to make one too, you can keep watching. I have the full instructions and measurements in the video, so you can make one with your scraps as well. And I'll also be posting the written instructions on my Etsy shop, which is always linked down below. Let's get started. I'm just going to move this all out of the way. Starting with materials, I've brought out one of the completed pouches so that when I lay out my scraps, I can point to which area they're for. So I'm going to lay it over here and use it as my example. So starting with this top row, you're going to need 3 pieces measuring 2.5 by 2.5. Since this is the top row, you can use directional fabrics. So I have my 3 pieces here. For the second row, it actually wraps around to the bottom, so it's one connected piece. Because of that, you're going to need 3 pieces measuring 2.5 wide by 4.5 high. And again, because this wraps around to the other side, you don't want to use directional fabric. But because we are using scraps, you definitely can if you want. It's just going to be upside down on one of the sides. And then finally for this last row, which is going to be this top row on this side, you're going to need 3 more squares measuring 2.5 by 2.5. And if you're using directional fabric, you want the direction on this side to point in and the direction on this side to point in. That way when it folds, the direction's correct on both sides. So here I'm using a mix of 100% quilting cotton and faux suede. That's because I just have a ton of that left over, but you can use all 100% quilting cotton. It's totally up to you. I just thought I would alternate and mix it in. For print B, you're going to need 2 pieces measuring 6.5 wide by 4.25 high. This will be for your lining, so I have my 2 pieces here. And then you're also going to need your zipper tab, which measures the width of my zipper, so approximately 1 inch by 2.25. Now you can have these 2 fabrics the same color, but because I'm using scraps, I decided to use 2 different prints because that's what I had. Next up, you're going to need pieces of fusible fleece of the same size as your scraps. However, we're only going to be fusing it to the 100% quilting cotton pieces and not the faux suede pieces. I'm using Pellon 987F, but you're welcome to use something thicker or thinner depending on what you would prefer. Now I'm using individual squares and rectangles of fusible fleece for 2 reasons. The first is that I wanted to use scrap pieces of fusible fleece that I had laying around that were really small from other projects, and like this I could cut them down and use them. The second is due to the types of materials I'm using. So the faux suede is a lot thicker, and I've personally found when sewn to things, the seam on the back doesn't like to get pressed down. It constantly tries to pop back up because it's a lot stronger. So when fusing the fusible fleece, sometimes it doesn't like to stick in that area and it kind of loosens or creates a bump here. So to prevent that, I fused individual layers of fusible fleece to each square so that it was sewn in and that wouldn't happen. Now, if you're using all of your pieces of 100% quilting cotton, you can actually wait until our 2 big pieces are joined together, and I'll tell you when in the video, and you can actually cut fusible fleece the same size instead of the individual pieces, and you can fuse it to those larger pieces. For our first sewing step, we're going to fuse our corresponding pieces of fusible fleece of the same size to our 100% quilting cotton pieces. So I have mine all here with the wrong side of my fabric facing the glue or bumpy side of the fusible fleece. That way when I put my iron on top, the glue will bond the 2 materials together. Now that my quilting cotton pieces are fused, I just re-laid out my squares and rectangles in the orientation that I wanted it to be sewn in. Now we're going to start assembling it. So we're going to assemble it into 3 rows first. So just like this. And to assemble a row, you're going to take your first piece, you're going to place it on top with right sides facing on the next piece, and then you're going to sew across the side you want to join using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once that's joined, you're going to open it up, and then you're going to do the same over here, right sides facing and a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and that's how the row will be joined. So I'll be back when all 3 of my rows are joined together. Once your rows are joined, they should look something like this. What we're going to do now is we're going to flip to the wrong side, and we're going to press our seams in opposite directions. So I've already done this so that I can show you, but we're going to press our top one way, the middle the other way, and then the bottom back the other way again. What this does is when we join our rows, it allows us to nest our seams so that they match perfectly. So as you can see here, it's very easy to get that matching seam. So now that mine are pressed, what I'm going to do is I'm only going to join the top row to this middle row here. We're going to leave this one for later. So I'm going to nest my seams, both of them here, and then I'm going to sew across here using a 1/4 inch seam allowance to join. Only this row. Now that these 2 rows are joined and this one is still on its own, anyone who is waiting to add their fusible fleece in larger pieces can do so now to this piece and this piece separately. We're now going to move on to adding our zipper. Taking our zipper and our zipper tab, we're now going to find the side that the zipper closes toward. So I'm just going to move my zipper back and see that it opens up this way. So this way is the way it closes toward. So I'm just going to open up that side of the zipper, and then I'm going to take my zipper tab and I'm going to align the right side of the fabric with the back of the zipper. And then I'm going to sew across here using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now I've already ironed my tab so it's easier for me to explain, but once it's sewn, you're going to open your tab, flip over to the right side of the zipper. You're going to fold this outer edge in by about 1/2 inch, and then back over the raw edge of the zipper to case it, so to cover it. And then what you're going to do, close to this folded edge, you're going to sew across to secure. And you want this folded edge to either be just past the seam or right on top of it to cover it. And a handy tip that I've mentioned in a previous video is to hold these folds in place. Instead of using pins or quilting clips, you can actually sew a couple stitches right here and right here that will hold it down so that when you sew it, it doesn't move. Taking our joined row pieces, what we're going to do is we're going to measure a 1/2 inch in from the outer edges. So this outer edge measures 2.5, and this one should measure about 6.5 inches. You're going to take your ruler and you're going to measure 1/2 inch in, and you're going to mark it on this top edge. You're going to do it here, 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 and here. And these markings are the location of where our zipper is going to be placed, because we want our zipper centered in here. Starting with either this piece or this piece, I'm going to start with this one. We're going to start attaching our zipper. I've shown this technique in my Pen Pal pencil case video, but what we're going to do is we're going to curve our zipper. So we want our zipper to be placed like this up here, but we want this edge curved in. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this half of the zipper tape, we're going to run the teeth parallel to that outer edge, and we're going to align it with our 1/2 inch marking right there, and we're just going to sew across here really close to the edge to hold it in place. With the end of the zipper secured, you're just going to rotate it so that this edge now aligns with the top edge here, just like this. And then where the curve is, you're going to clean up that fold so that it looks something like this. And you're going to sew a couple stitches across to secure. That way your zipper is now curved. On this side, you're going to align the tab with that 1/2 inch marking and sew a couple stitches here as well. Once this is all done, your zipper will be nice and centered with your piece. Now that it's secure, it should look something like that. And you're going to flip over to the wrong side, and you're just going to sew across to attach the zipper to your piece using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now that your zipper is secured to one side, you're going to take one of your lining pieces and you're going to place it on top with the right side of the fabric facing the back of the zipper and the right side of your exterior. You're going to align this edge, and then you're going to flip to your fusible fleece side, so the side of the exterior that has some of the fusible fleece, and you're going to sew in line with the seam you just sewed. With the lining sewed to our exterior and our zipper, we're going to open it up like so. We're going to fold it back, and then we're going to begin attaching the next side of our zipper tape. So with our other piece of our exterior, we want it to go like this based on the direction of our fabric. So we want it like this. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna attach this half of the zipper tape to this marking. So just like before, we want our teeth to be parallel with the edge. So just like that. And we're gonna sew close to the edge to secure it in place. Now that that's secure, we're gonna repeat the same process as last time. We're gonna rotate our zipper so that it's aligned with that top edge. We're gonna adjust our fold over here so that our bend is neat and tidy. We're gonna sew a couple stitches over here to hold it in place. And then we're gonna align our tab with the other 1/2 inch marking and sew a couple stitches over here to hold it in place. That way, when everything's all secured, it's nicely centered with this piece too. Now that that's secure, I wanna give you an optional step that you may wanna consider. So because we're working with squares, we don't want to look at our zipper from above and see that they're misaligned. So something that I like to do is I like to pull my zipper tape like this, see where the square is, and make a marking for where this square needs to align. So on this side as well, just a little marking on my zipper tape. It doesn't have to be perfect, just generally the same spot so that when I sew this to my tape, I know where my squares generally should meet so that they're aligned when you look at your zipper tape from above. So if you don't want to do that, you don't have to, but the next step after that is just to sew across here using a 1/4 inch seam allowance to secure this piece to our zipper. Once that's sewn, it should look something like that inside, nice and aligned. Then what we're going to do is we're going to flip back over to this side and we're going to get our last lining piece and we're going to place it on top with the right side of the fabric facing the back of the zipper and the right side of the lining. So just like that. Keeping it aligned with this top edge, we're just going to sew across in line with the seam we just sewed on the fusible fleece side. Once the last piece of lining is secured, you're just going to open everything up like this. And then you're going to press your fabric away from the zipper on both sides, making sure to protect any fabrics that may get damaged by the heat of the iron, and also not to apply too much heat on the plastic zipper teeth. Then you're going to sew a top stitch on both sides of the zipper. Now that your top stitch is complete, it should look something like this. I opted for a gold thread to match my zipper teeth because I had a lot of different colors here and I kind of thought the gold would look good with all of them. So next what you're going to do is you're going to take the bottom edge of this piece and you're going to bring it to the bottom edge of the rectangular side and you're going to nest your seams. So just like before, one to one side, one to the other, and you want to make sure you don't rotate this one and end up with a twist in here. You want it nice and flat, and because we ironed our seams before, it should work out perfectly. So once they're nested, you're just going to sew across using a 1/4 inch seam allowance to join. Now that that's secure, we're going to bring this seam and this seam together. So we're going to pull this open like this, and then we're going to nest these seams together, and you can sew a couple stitches here to secure it, and then you're going to repeat the same thing on this side. So nest the seam and secure. But what you want to make sure is that on each side your seam goes to the same way. So on this side, it's pointing down, and on this way, it would point up. That way you don't have a twist. Now that our sides are matched and secured, we're going to begin sewing all the way around. But before we do that, I have an optional step for you. So when we sew all the way around, we want our zipper to point in toward the lining. The step here is that you can sew a couple stitches to make sure these ends are nice and aligned on both sides. You don't have to do this, but if you want these aligned, then you can sew a couple stitches here to hold them in place. Next, you're going to make sure your zipper is open. Then you're going to bring your lining pieces together with right sides facing, making sure they're aligned. And you're going to sew around here and here, so all the way around, not sewing this edge and leaving a 3-inch opening in your lining. And a tip when leaving openings is to start facing in, so start here, sew in the distance of your seam allowance, pivot or turn, and then continue your stitch. When you turn this inside out, that helps to keep the layers inside and to have a nice flush edge for your opening. Once you've sewn around and left your opening, you're just going to trim all of your strings, and then you're going to use your opening to turn your bag inside out. As you're turning it inside out, you can just use a knitting needle or a point turner, I think that's what it's called, to push those quarters out so that they're nice and sharp. Once it's turned inside out, you're just going to give your bag a good press, and you're also going to press the raw edges of your opening inside so that the edge is nice and flush like this. And then you can either sew across by machine or hand sew the opening closed. But once that's complete, you'll tuck your lining inside of your bag, and your scrap-friendly patchwork zipper pouch is now complete. I really love how different each of these bags come out depending on the prints you use and how great they are for using up your scraps, including fusible fleece. I really hope you enjoyed this sewing tutorial. If you're looking for other projects, feel free to check out my YouTube channel and my Etsy shop, which is linked down below. And that's all for today, so I'll see you next time.